Yankee Stadium. The opposing pitcher didn't look at Ruth. The catcher gave the signal. 4 pitches. Wide. Intentional walk. Safe choice. Everyone understood why. Giving Ruth a pitch to hit was more dangerous than dealing with the next batter. Ruth walked to first base. Slowly. Quietly. But as he passed, he said something. Not to the catcher. Not to the pitcher. To the next batter. The man emerging from the dugout. A whisper. And that whisper became the loudest moment of the game. To understand what Ruth said, and why it worked, you need to understand something about Babe Ruth that the home run numbers and the mythology have always obscured. He understood baseball at a level that most people never noticed, because his physical gifts were so overwhelming that the intelligence underneath them was invisible. Ruth was not just strong. Ruth was not just fast. Ruth understood what made hitters hit. And on that afternoon in 1926, he used that understanding in a way that nobody on the field expected. The game was deep into its middle innings. Yankees trailing by 1 run. 2 men on base. 2 outs. Ruth coming to the plate with everything on the line. This was the situation that Ruth had been born for. Had been built for. Every major achievement of his career had happened in exactly this kind of moment. When the margin was thin and the stakes were total, and the crowd was leaning forward, and the pitcher was trying to decide whether to compete or to concede. The opposing manager made his decision from the dugout. The signal went to the catcher. The catcher stood up and extended his arm wide, away from the plate. The universal gesture, the intentional walk. We are not going to throw Babe Ruth anything he can hit. We are going to put him on first base and take our chances with the next batter. The crowd at Yankee Stadium reacted with the specific sound that crowds make when Ruth is walked intentionally, a mixture of frustration and dark appreciation. Everyone understood the logic. Nobody liked it. The pitcher threw the 4 wide pitches with the efficient disinterest of a man completing a formality. Ball 1. Ball 2. Ball 3. Ball 4. Ruth stood at the plate and watched each pitch go by, without moving, without reacting, without showing the irritation or resignation that intentional walks sometimes produce in hitters who know they are being denied. He watched. He processed. His mind was already elsewhere, already working on something that had nothing to do with the walk itself. The walk was over. The next batter was coming. And the next batter was the thing that Ruth had already decided to address. He took first base at his unhurried pace. The pace that was so recognizable, so specifically Ruth, that it looked the same whether he was rounding the bases after a home run or simply moving to first after a walk. Deliberate, unhurried. A man who moved through baseball games at his own pace, regardless of what the game demanded. The next batter was making his way from the on-deck circle to home plate. A professional, a good hitter. Not Ruth. No one was Ruth, but a man who had earned his place in this lineup and who understood what his job was in this moment. His job was to hit, to produce, to make the opposing manager regret the intentional walk by making the batter behind Ruth dangerous enough to damage. He was walking toward the plate when Ruth passed him. The brief intersection of 2 Yankees moving in opposite directions. Ruth toward first, the next batter toward home. A moment that lasted perhaps 2 seconds, long enough for Ruth to say something, which he did. A whisper, directed at the approaching batter, low enough that the catcher couldn't hear it, low enough that the umpire couldn't hear it, low enough that nobody in the press box would ever know exactly what was said. But the batter heard it. And the batter's face showed that he heard it. Something changed in his expression. Something small. Something that a person who wasn't watching closely might have missed entirely. A slight widening of the eyes. A slight shift in the set of the jaw. Something that looked, if you saw it at all, like a man who has just been handed something he wasn't expecting to receive. What Ruth said has been reconstructed from what the batter told teammates afterward. What teammates told reporters. What reporters printed in the days that followed. The batter never gave a complete public account of the exchange. Ruth, characteristically, said nothing about it when asked. denied remembering the specifics, said something general about talking to teammates all the time and not being able to remember every conversation. This was either genuinely true, Ruth did talk constantly and probably didn't catalog every word, or it was the specific evasion of a man who understood that the power of what he had done depended partly on it remaining mysterious. The version that teammates told reporters was simple. Ruth, walking past the next batter, had whispered, "He walked me because he's afraid of me. Now he has to face you. Show him he made the wrong choice." That was it. That was the complete whisper. 8 words, maybe 10, short enough to say in 2 seconds while passing on a baseball field. Long enough to produce what came next. The batter stepped into the box. The pitcher, who had just executed the intentional walk with the mechanical efficiency of a man handling a necessary formality, looked at the new situation. Runner on first, same 2 outs, the same lead to protect. Different batter. The calculation from the manager's perspective was that this was a better situation than facing Ruth, that the intentional walk had done exactly what intentional walks are designed to do, moved the most dangerous bat out of the equation, and created a matchup that favored the pitcher. The pitcher believed this, had believed it when the signal came from the dugout, still believed it as he looked at the batter standing at the plate. What the pitcher didn't know, what nobody except the batter knew, was what Ruth had said in passing, what was now sitting in the batter's chest like something lit. Subscribe right now if you've ever said the exact right thing to someone at exactly the right moment. Hit like if you already know what happened on the next pitch. And drop a comment. What's the best piece of advice anyone ever gave you before a big moment? Because what happened in the next 30 seconds is the part of this story that nobody forgets. The first pitch came in. The batter swung. Contact. The sound of it was the sound that announces a well-struck baseball before the flight path confirms it. The ball went up, went back, went over the right field wall. Home run. 2 runs scored. Yankees in front. The crowd at Yankee Stadium erupted with the specific velocity of a crowd that has been waiting for something and has received it more completely than expected. The batter rounded the bases, crossed home plate, returned to the dugout where Ruth was waiting. Ruth said something to him there too. This part has also been described in various ways. The version that teammates remember is that Ruth simply nodded, the gesture of a man whose prediction has been confirmed and who does not need to elaborate on the confirmation. The batter nodded back. 2 men who had exchanged 8 words at a critical moment and watched those 8 words produce the result that Ruth had intended when he said them. The opposing manager watched the home run land from his dugout, processed what had just happened. His intentional walk, the safe choice, the logical choice, the choice that protected the lead by removing the most dangerous bat from the equation, had produced a 2-run home run by the batter he had decided was less dangerous than Ruth. The logic had been correct by every conventional measure. Ruth was Ruth. The next batter was good, but not Ruth. Walking Ruth to face the next batter was textbook. The textbook had not accounted for Ruth whispering something to the next batter as he passed, had not accounted for the specific way that certain words, said by the right person at the right moment, can transform what a hitter brings to the plate, had not accounted for Babe Ruth understanding that baseball is not only played with the body, but with something underneath the body, with the mind, with the specific fuel that the right words can provide at the right moment. The manager replaced his pitcher the next inning. The game continued. Yankees won. The whisper was not discussed publicly at the time, was not the headline. The home run was the headline, the comeback, the victory. The whisper was the private knowledge of 2 men, the one who said it and the one who heard it, and eventually, of the teammates who heard the story in the locker room afterward. It spread slowly, through the Yankees clubhouse, through the league eventually, through the press, as these stories travel through the press, in fragments, in versions that were slightly different from each other, in the way that things become known when there is no record and only memory to work from. Eventually it became what it is now, A story about Babe Ruth understanding baseball in a way that the home run totals and the batting averages have always told incompletely. That he was not simply a physical force, was not simply the product of extraordinary natural gifts applied to a sport, was a man who thought about the game, who understood what hitters needed to hit, who could communicate that understanding in passing, in 2 seconds, in 8 words, in a whisper, and watch it become a home run before he reached first base. The 4 wide pitches had removed him from the at-bat. They had not removed him from the game. He had stayed in the game the only way available to him, with words, with the whisper that the pitcher never heard and the manager never knew about, and that produced the home run that ended the lead, that the intentional walk had been designed to protect. Ruth reached first base. The walk had worked. Ruth had walked. The walk had also failed, completely, definitively, because Babe Ruth, on his way to first base, had turned a safe decision into a mistake, with 8 words, and the understanding of a man who had spent 20 years learning exactly what baseball players needed to hear.